Welcome back to Conflicts of Interest. This is episode 681, and today is October 2nd, 2024. I'm the host of the show, Kyle Anzalone. A lot of news to talk about in today's show, but first I want to mention the sponsor of the program, and that is the Expat Money Summit 2024, the world's largest offshore event. It's taking place entirely online next week, October 7th through the 11th. It's put on by Mikhail Thorup, and headline speakers include Dr. Ron Paul, Tom Woods, and Scott Horton. So absolutely great lineup of speakers. You can get a complimentary ticket to the event just by going to expatmoneysummit.com. Again, that's expatmoney.summit.com. Or, I know a lot of you have already done this, you followed through from the affiliate link in the show notes page to claim your complimentary ticket. Additionally, I will be speaking at the event. We'll be on a panel alongside my friends Dave DeCamp and Hervoya Morik, and we will be discussing World War III. Is it fear-mongering or a genuine concern? This will be a VIP panel to the event, and to get your VIP ticket to the event, you can also follow through from the link in the show notes page. There is a promo code KYLE, K-Y-L-E, that will save you $100 off that ticket. All right, everybody. Just a reminder, you can find this show at the Libertarian Institute, on the blog at antiwar.com, YouTube, Rumble, or Odysee for the video version of the show. Of course, up anywhere you can listen to audio podcasts, and follow me on Twitter at KyleAnzalone_. Now let's get into the news today. First story up here, incoming NATO chief, bringing Ukraine closer to alliance is top priority. So, during his swearing-in ceremony as new Secretary General of the North Atlantic Alliance, Mark Rutte declared his top priorities were strengthening the alliance and bringing Ukraine closer to the bloc. So on Tuesday, Rutte took over as civilian head of NATO from longtime Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg. He said, the first priority is to keep NATO strong and to ensure our defenses remain effective and credible against all threats. My second priority is to step up our support for Ukraine and bring it even closer to NATO, because there can be no lasting security in Europe without a strong, independent Ukraine. So leaders in the North Atlantic Alliance have also often presented the war as an existential issue for the bloc, arguing that once Moscow is done in Ukraine, it will invade Poland or a Baltic state. However, Russian President Vladimir Putin has argued for decades that Kiev's membership in NATO presents a unique national security threat to Moscow. Additionally, the Kremlin has struggled to achieve its limited war aims in Ukraine, suggesting the Russian army is not equipped to take on a NATO state. Rather, Russia invaded Ukraine because Kiev had become a de facto member of the alliance, a relationship Rutte hopes to expand. Stoltenberg, Rutte's predecessor, served as Secretary General for a decade, overseeing the expansion of NATO to Russia's border and increasing the bloc's military ties with Ukraine and Georgia. Stoltenberg remained in the post for an extended period of time because the alliance was unable to come to a consensus regarding his replacement. Ultimately, Rutte received widespread support from the bloc's 32 members, in part because he is known for being tough with former President Donald Trump. Rutte's appointment as top civilian in the alliance is seen as a move to, quote, Trump-proof NATO support for Ukraine should the former president win the November election. While some top officials in NATO countries are concerned that Trump would end Washington's massive support for Kiev, he supported the $65 billion Ukraine aid package earlier this year, and as president, he took steps like he was the first U.S. president to provide lethal arms to Ukraine. And so Trump definitely is supportive of having this strong and close NATO Ukraine relationship. He has also said things like the war wouldn't have happened under my watch, I would end the war right away, but he's not saying anything that would be in line with the policy that a realist or an anti-war activist like myself would advocate for. All right, next up here, we're getting into news on the Middle East, and it's not very good. Starting off here with this one from Dave DeCamp on October 1st at antiwar.com. The U.S. privately encouraged Israel to escalate in Lebanon. And on this one, I almost messaged Dave to just make sure that he didn't maybe forget not or something in the headline here, because this was a real head scratcher. why would the Biden administration want, just a month before an election, to escalate to a major war in the Middle East? Well, here's what Dave writes. Politico reported on Monday that despite the Biden administration's public calls for a ceasefire in Lebanon, White House officials privately told Israeli officials that they agreed with the plan to escalate in Lebanon and shift the focus to the north. The report, which cited U.S. and Israeli officials, said the message was delivered by Brett McGurk, the top Middle East official in the National Security Council, and Amos Hochstein, an Israeli-born veteran of the IDF who works as a special advisor to President Biden. The report said that Israel told the U.S. of its plans to focus on Lebanon, but didn't offer much detail, and McGurk and Hochstein relayed to their Israeli counterparts, while they still urged a cautious approach, the timing was likely opportune for such a move, especially after Hezbollah had been significantly degraded in the months prior. I have to say, I really do not understand the calculation in the White House as to why this would be a good move, unless they figure that the slaughter in Gaza has just gotten so bad and that it's so obvious that there's about to be ethnic cleansing there, that the only thing to distract the American people from South Israel is for a war in North Israel. And in North Israel, Hezbollah can punch back, right? So this is what is going on in Gaza is very, very difficult to describe as a war in any real terms. You have one side of this conflict with F-35s, F-16s, tanks, artilleries, missiles, air defenses. They could hit any corner of Gaza. They have 100% surveillance over the Gaza Strip. They're constantly pounding anywhere they want to within all of Gaza with as large a bomb as they can. And there's effectively nothing that the Palestinians on the ground could do about it. Now, there are Israeli soldiers who have entered Gaza, and some of them have been killed by Hamas in like kind of ground fighting operations. And so there are some aspects of what's happening in Gaza that does resemble warfare, but the bulk of the military operations that Israel carrying out are airstrikes in Gaza, and also, just general demolitions, clearing, and stuff like that. And these are things that Hamas and the Palestinians have no way to combat. And so it's really not a war. Shooting fish in a bucket, it may be one way to describe it, or onslaught, genocide, right? Like this is extremely one-sided what's happening in Gaza. And honestly, the pictures coming out are horrific, and maybe the American people are getting a little tired of it. Now, if Israel ends up in its war in the north, where the other side does have air defenses, they may not have an advanced air fleet of F-35s or comparable Russian fighter jets or anything like that, but they certainly have advanced missiles and rockets and are able of hitting Israeli territory. So say if Israel bombs Beirut, not in a proportional sense, but certainly in a tit for tat sense, Lebanon can hit back against, or not, Hezbollah particularly can hit back against Israeli cities in a way that Hamas cannot. And so maybe in that way, this just resonates better with the American people. Now Israel is in a fight, right? If it's a boxing match and the opponent is a 10-year-old child versus Mike Tyson, then there's something kind of disgusting about that, and people don't want to watch it. But Mike Tyson versus Jake or Logan Paul or whatever the next big fight is, that is something that people want to watch, because even if one isn't a professional fighter and the other one's 50 years old, it's two adults going at it, and they're both grown, built men who can trade blows, unlike just the massacre of what's happening in Gaza here. So the report contradicts prior claims from the U.S. officials that said they had been seeking a ceasefire in Lebanon and are working towards a diplomatic solution, but the U.S. has shown that they do support Israel's actions in Lebanon, as the Biden administration has given $8.7 billion in new military aid amid the drastic escalation. The Politico report said McGurk, Hochstein, and other top U.S. officials are describing the war in Lebanon as a history-defining moment, one that will reshape the Middle East for the better years to come. And this is disturbing, right? Because if they were talking about some kind of very limited fighting in the Middle East, then okay, maybe we could de-escalate from that. But if they're a history-defining moment, that that maybe means Israel taking all of Lebanon south of the Litani River. Maybe it also means Israel using that moment as cover to take at least northern, if not all of Gaza and massive swaths of the West Bank. I mean, a history-defining moment. This is an offensive invasion of a neighboring country, and potentially with the aim of seizing their territory. I mean, this is exactly what the U.S. has been hyperventilating about and calling Putin Hitler for the past 2.5 years for doing in Ukraine. And now we're giving it an endorsement, not only a verbal endorsement, but, support it with our weapons going on in Lebanon. All right, so let's talk about the invasion. So Israel on Monday said the invasion or on Tuesday morning in Israel, Monday in the U.S., said that the invasion was underway. Now, Hezbollah and the Lebanese army are disputing that to some degree. So Dave writes here, on Tuesday, Hezbollah and the Lebanese army said they have not seen Israeli troops enter Lebanon after the IDF announced its ground forces were conducting raids across the border. So Hezbollah media chief Muhammad Adif told Al Jazeera, adding, all Zionist claims that Israeli occupation forces have entered Lebanon are false. There have been no direct ground clashes between resistance fighters and occupation forces. A Lebanese military source told AFP, we have not observed any penetration by Israeli forces into Lebanese territory. UN peacekeepers in Lebanon also said they didn't observe any Israeli troops cross the border. The denials of Israeli troops entering Lebanon came after the Israeli military said that its forces were conducting limited, localized, and targeted ground raids in southern Lebanon. Later on Tuesday, the Israeli military claimed that commandos had conducted dozens of ground raids in southern Lebanon over the past few months and said the operations would continue until displaced Israelis can return to northern Israel. The IDF military spokesman Daniel Hagari said, our soldiers entered Hezbollah's underground infrastructure, exposed Hezbollah's hidden weapons caches, and seized and destroyed weapons, including advanced Iranian-made weapons. Also on Tuesday, Israel told people in southern Lebanon to evacuate to the north of the Al-Wali River, which is about 36 miles from the border, and Israeli strikes on Lebanon continued. So since September, 23 Israelis, since September 23rd, Israeli strikes on Lebanon have slaughtered over 1,000 people, and we'll talk more about that here. So in response to the Israeli belligerence in the Middle East, because this is a few different things that happened, it is Iran retaliated to Israel on Tuesday by launching what Israel says are 181 ballistic missiles at 3 different targets in Israel, potentially the Mossad headquarters, which is in Tel Aviv, as well as 2 military bases were targeted by Iran. If you listen to the Iranians, 90 to 99% of their missiles hit their targets. The Israelis, I think, claim a 90% shoot down rate. The U.S. says they did help by firing interceptors from ships stationed out in the Mediterranean Sea to help Israel down some of these missiles. Iran said it was a response for the killing of Hamas political chief Ismail Haniyeh, who was killed during the Iranian president's swearing in ceremony in Tehran last month, and then also the killing of Hassan Nasrallah and an IRGC commander who was killed alongside Nasrallah. So this from Dave DeCamp, October 1st, antiwar.com. Sullivan, U.S. will ensure Iran faces severe consequences for attacking Israel. U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said Tuesday the U.S. would work with Israel to ensure Iran faces, quote, severe consequences for launching a missile attack on Israel, which came in response to recent Israeli escalations. So Sullivan told reporters at the White House, there will be severe consequences for this attack, and we will work with Israel to make sure that's the case. President Biden said the U.S. was in active discussions with Israel on what the response would be. The United States is fully supportive of Israel, he said. Media reports say Iran fired at least 180 missiles at Israel. Iran's IRGC said the attack was launched in retaliation for the Israeli assassination of Haniyeh, Nasrallah, and an IRGC commander. The IRGC claims that 90% of missiles hit their targets, while Israel claims that most were intercepted. Videos that have surfaced show the Iranian missiles making an impact on Israeli military sites. So far, there's no word on deaths, but a Palestinian man who was living in the Israeli-occupied West Bank was killed when shrapnel from an intercepted missile fell onto him in Jericho. The U.S. said that it helped Israel intercept some of the Iranian missiles, but portrayed the defense as a success. Sullivan said the Iranian attack appears to have been defeated and ineffective. So, if that is actually what the White House is calculating, is concerning. I think what the Iranian attack was something that was meant to be fairly similar to what Iran did in Iraq to the Al-Assad air base after the U.S. killed General Qasem Soleimani, where unlike with the attack they launched in Israel in April, it wasn't telegraphed and wasn't communicated to the Americans 72 hours in advance. And so the Americans and the Brits and the Jordanians and others weren't able to, and the Israelis weren't able to prepare for the attack. And so it seems to me that made the attack far more effective. If you look at videos, lots of the missiles are reaching their intended targets, right? They are getting to the ground. They are not being intercepted in the air by different interceptors. I would say at least dozens. Iran's estimate of 90% seems quite ambitious, especially if some of the missiles were downed on the way. Certainly didn't see 181, or I guess it would have been somewhere around 150 missiles hit their targets inside Israel with the different videos. But again, certainly dozens, scores of missiles were able to penetrate Israel's air defenses and hit different areas in Israel. Now, the reason I say it's important to not see this as being defeated and ineffective is I don't think Iran was trying here to inflict a mass casualty event on Israel, rather to show Tel Aviv that, look, we can bypass your air defenses and we can inflict pain on you. This was a relatively small attack. You were unable to defeat it. Imagine if it was a more serious attack. And I'm not 100% sure, I'm not in discussions with the Ayatollah, so I know for sure that that's what Iran was trying to achieve here. But after the attack was over, Iran did say, that's all for now, and we're willing to de-escalate from here. And it's now the Israelis and the Americans that are saying we need to escalate further. And so if Sullivan, Biden, Netanyahu are all assessing that the attack was defeated and ineffective, it misses the message that Iran was trying to send from the attack. It wasn't trying to knock out a lot of Israeli military capabilities just to show that Israel that they can. And if that's their assessment, then Israel and the U.S. are going to launch a major assault back on Iran, believing that Iran can't hit back, and they may be very, very wrong about that. So Sullivan continued in his statement, "We are proud of the actions that we've taken alongside Israel to protect and defend Israel. The attack came the day after the Pentagon announced it was sending a few thousand troops to the Middle East to prepare for the defense of Israel if needed. The Iranian attack came after over a week of dramatic escalations in Israel's bombing campaign in Lebanon, which has killed over 1,000 people since September 23rd, including many civilians. Despite claims from the Biden administration officials that they wanted to see a ceasefire in Lebanon, the U.S. has backed Israel's escalations and is now prepared to defend it from any consequences it may face. Iran has signaled that it's done attacking Israel, but warned there would be a crushing response if Israel hits back, and Israeli officials have made it clear they plan to respond." So Daniel Hagari said, "There will be consequences. Our defensive and offensive capabilities are at their highest level of readiness. Our operational plans are ready. We will respond whenever, and however we choose, in accordance with the directives of the government of Israel." Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Iran will pay for the attack. In his statement, he said, "This evening, Iran made a big mistake, and it will pay for it. The regime in Tehran does not understand our determination to defend ourselves and to exact a price from our enemies." And so this Iranian attack on Israel, while limited, while meant to be calibrated not to escalate to a direct war with Israel, I do think gave Netanyahu exactly what he wanted. He wants, again, this is why I said on the show yesterday that I think Netanyahu wants to expand this war as far as possible between now and November 5th. I think this is a huge giveaway to Donald Trump. It's a massive, it's going to be a massive boon to Donald Trump's reelection chances if there's a major war in the Middle East that Biden is responsible for lighting a fire under. I think the American people are going to be very upset with that, and it's not going to be something that drives, even if it doesn't cause people to switch from Biden to Trump, I do think it will keep at least some Biden voters away from the ballot box, and it will drive some people who were on the fence about Trump to the ballot box, and for a couple of reasons, right? One, if you are going to have a major war breakout, Trump does seem like the kind of leader that you would want in charge over Biden or Harris, just in he projects some level of strength and capability, and the other two just simply do not. Additionally, I think there's going to be some people who are very upset with Biden and by, Connection Harris for failing to prevent this war. And then also some people who think that it's the weakness of the current administration that has caused this war to break out. I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think the Biden administration is only weak when it comes to standing up to our allies, not our enemies, which I think is the opposite calculation that a lot of people make. They're going to say, oh, if we were stronger against Iran, then this war wouldn't have broken out. I think it's the opposite. If we stood up to Israel, then this war would not have broken out. And so I do think we're going to see some kind of Israeli major response in the region against Iran in the coming days. And he's going to have a lot of support in the United States. Senator Graham calls for U.S. to strike Iranian oil sites in response to attack on Israel. So Senator Lindsey Graham on Tuesday called for the U.S. to coordinate with Israel on strikes against Iranian oil refineries in response to the Iranian missile attack on Israel, which came into retaliation for Israeli escalations in the region. Graham said, this missile attack against Israel should be the breaking point, and I would urge the Biden administration to coordinate an overwhelming response with Israel, starting with Iran's ability to refine oil. These oil refineries need to be hit and hit hard because it is the source of cash for the regime to perpetuate their terror. The hawkish senator said that he spoke with former President Donald Trump about the Iranian attack. I spoke with Donald Trump earlier in the day, and he is determined and resolved to protect Israel from threats of terrorism emanating from Iran. I can assure you, Iran attacks Israel at their own peril. Other Republicans in Congress have spread support for Israel to take action against Iran, including Senator Marco Rubio. I urge the reimposition of maximum pressure campaign against Iran and fully support Israel's right to respond disproportionately to stop the threat. The United States will continue to stand with Israel. And this comment is absolutely insane from Rubio. One, the maximum pressure campaign has not been curtailed in any way. And so the idea that the Biden administration needs to ramp it back up is just completely untrue. It's in fact more intense than it was under Donald Trump. And number two, responding disproportionately is a war crime. So Marco Rubio is actively calling for Israel to commit war crimes here. Absolutely insane. So the U.S. intervened directly to help Israel intercept Iranian missiles, and the Biden administration says it's coordinating with Israel on the response. Iran's IRGC said the missile attack was a response to the killings of Hania Nasrallah and Abbas Nilfosanhan, an IRGC commander who was killed alongside Nasrallah. All right, so let's talk about the overall impact of what is happening in Lebanon. Israeli airstrikes killed 55 people in 24 hours. So the Lebanese health ministry said Israel's bombing campaign killed 95 people and wounded 156 as Israeli strikes continue to hit targets across the country. So the ministry wrote on X, the Israeli enemy raids in the past 24 hours in towns and villages in southern Lebanon resulted in the deaths of 55 people and the injury of 156. According to AFP, Lebanon's disaster agency said earlier that Israeli operations at Lebanon have killed about 1,873 people since October 8th, 2023. Over 1,000 have been killed, including many civilians, since Israel dramatically ramped up its bombing campaign on September 23rd. Israeli strikes in Lebanon on Tuesday continued to target the capital of Beirut. According to Middle East Eye, Israel targeted residential buildings in Beirut's southern suburbs and a building near the Kuwaiti embassy in the city. The airstrikes came as the Israeli military says its forces were carrying out limited ground raids in southern Lebanon, although both Hezbollah and the Lebanese military denied Israeli troops entered the country. Israel told people in southern Lebanon to evacuate an area that stretches 36 miles from the Israeli border, adding to the massive displacement crisis caused by Israeli military operations. The Lebanese prime minister said earlier this week that already 1 million people have been displaced. All right, quick update here on Gaza. Israel kills 23 more Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. So Gaza's health ministry said Tuesday that at least 23 Palestinians were killed by Israel in Gaza over the previous 24-hour period, bringing the recorded death toll since October 7th to 41,638. Another 101 Palestinians were injured by Israeli attacks, bringing the total number of wounded to 96,460. The health ministry numbers are an undercount since they only include the dead and wounded Palestinians who have brought to hospitals and morgues. Later on Tuesday, Palestinian officials told Middle East Eye that the Israeli military killed at least 37 people in Gaza on Tuesday. The health ministry's figures are usually put out around midday Gaza time, meaning it doesn't include all Palestinians killed that day. Israeli attacks on Tuesday included 2 strikes on houses in the Nusra refugee camp in central Gaza, which killed at least 13 people, including women and children. Another strike hit a school turned shelter for displaced people in the Tufa neighborhood of Gaza City, killing at least 7. The massacres in Gaza come as the world's attention is on Lebanon and the Iranian missile attack on Israel. The regional escalations put much less scrutiny on Israel's genocidal war in Gaza, as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is reportedly considering an ethnic cleansing plan for at least northern Gaza. In September, Gaza's health ministry released names of 34,344 Palestinians who have been killed by Israeli forces, including 11,355 children. Among the children were 710 infants who did not make it to their first birthday. All right, wrapping up here. Israel is not just murdering in Lebanon or in Gaza or in the West Bank or in Yemen, but also in Syria. Israeli strikes kill six, including TV anchor, around Syrian capital of Damascus. And so this one from Jason Ditz at antiwar.com, October 1st. While Israel's main focus is the ongoing invasion of the Gaza Strip and their new invasion of Lebanon, that doesn't mean they're not going to find time to keep attacking other neighbors and killing people. This was underscored today when they attacked areas around Syria's capital, Damascus. Reports are the strikes included attacks on vehicles in the upscale Maza district, and they also struck anti-aircraft radar stations at the Damascus airport. This may suggest that they're trying to soften up air defenses in Syria for future attacks. At least 6 people were reported killed in the attacks, including 3 civilians. Among the civilians was female TV journalist Safa Ahmed, described as an anchor associated with the Syrian state TV Syrian state media, that's Sana, and they confirmed that she was among the dead. 9 civilians were reported wounded in the strikes, and they have not been identified. It's unclear who the non-civilians killed were, as the Maza district includes a number of government offices as well as embassy districts of Damascus. Though it isn't often a high profile as the ongoing wars, Israel has been striking targets in Syria intermittently for years, about weekly, I would say, and as recently as the past week struck Syria alongside its targets in Yemen, Lebanon, Gaza, and the occupied West Bank. Today's strike suggests Israel's escalation is far from over, and attacking radar systems may portend future strikes around Syria. All right, everybody. That's where I'm going to wrap up the show today. Thank you all so much for tuning in. More later in the week.